A big win that nearly wasn't, a trade that almost was, and a week that could be. We talk about all that and more on today's episode of Locked on Wild.
You're Locked on Wild, your daily podcast on the Minnesota Wild. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Locked on Wild, your daily Minnesota Wild podcast, part of the Locked on Sports Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you, as always, for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. Just as a reminder, you can find Locked on Wild on all of your favorite podcast platforms absolutely free of charge. On today's episode of Locked on Wild, we're joined by Alex Micheletti to recap a thrilling win for the Minnesota Wild against the Nashville Predators, a game that nearly could have been a loss. We'll also talk about 10 minutes of Ryan O'Reilly being a Minnesota Wild centerman, and we'll look ahead at a tough week, but an opportunity for the Wild to keep rolling here after starting to get their footing back with the month of February now moving towards the back end of the month. Today's episode of Locked on Wild is brought to you once again by FanDuel Sportsbook, official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. My name is Seth Topol, your daily Minnesota Wild insider, and it is a Victory Micheletti Monday as Alex Micheletti joins us. And we talk about a fun but tense win against the Nashville Predators. That really helped cap off a week in which we have seen the Wild start to get some positive momentum back. And it came after that crushing loss to the Colorado Avalanche, a game that by and large the Wilds had the better play, couldn't score, and they come back, they beat Dallas in a shootout, and now they pick up a win against the Nashville Predators. So things starting to look better, but it still is going to be a tough road because, as we talked about earlier today, Alex, on Twitter, this is going to come down all the way to the end of the season with all these teams battling for wild card spots. And so you may get a little separation now, but man, this is going to go down to the wire.
Yeah, all it takes is one little slip up, right? And then you allow the teams right behind you to get right back with you. It's gonna be intense with the Flames right there. Because they're neck and neck with the Wild for that last play, a wild card spot. But the Wild are really close to Winnipeg now and Dallas, and Colorado's starting to get more healthy, and so it's it's gonna be crazy. I mean, you're gonna need good goaltending, and Gustafsson has really shown that, and you'll need Fleury too, because Gustafsson can't do it all by himself. You don't want him to get hurt either, so they're gonna have to work in a tandem, and it's gonna come down to the wire, just like you said, and it's gonna be intense. There's a ton of parity this season, it seems like, and also, what's weird about that too is you have teams that are at the absolute bottom trying to get Bedard too. And so when you play those teams, you absolutely cannot lose to them, give them any hope like we talk about a lot. So yeah, it's a pun intended, no pun intended, but it's a wild mix right now.
Yeah, it's not weird, it's wild.
Yeah. Yes.
And you look at this Nashville game, and there are a couple of things to take from it with getting multiple 5-on-5 goals.
3.
You get one from Brandon Duhaime, you get one from Kirill, you get one from Ryan Hartman. What it does is it does a couple of things. It doesn't force your power play to be as it doesn't force you to have to rely on the power play as much. And yes, the Wild did have a power play goal, but that double minor for Nino, that was dicey.
Yeah.
At that stretch.
Yeah, I came back to haunt them a little bit, because then then of course Nino gets one after. So yeah, I mean, it was nerve wracking. Like we talked about before too. You can't let Nashville even get a point there, and then Ryan Hartman, he apparently doesn't need a stick to score. It's just like another one that bounces in off him, but they'll take it. I mean, this team has really needed the puck luck, and it finally goes their way for once. It was super nice to see, and to finish off another Central Division opponent is huge. Yeah, Gustafson hung on there.
And the big part too is getting help for Kirill Kaprizov, because Kirill he's been carrying the team all season. He had that look to his game of, I'm gonna do whatever it takes to come away with the win. But then you have guys like Brandon Duhaime who chips in and was just having a chance to watch the game in person and see all the things that the cameras don't pick up. He was just a force, and especially offensively, being the first guy to the puck behind the Predators' net. He drew a penalty on one of those instances. He had a couple of shots on goal because of instances like that, and then he parks in front of the net to deflect the first goal in past UC Saros. And with a goalie like Saros, you can't rely on just like point blank shots. You got to come away with deflections. And I don't think it's any coincidence that the Wild had 2 goals that were deflected in. And they also had a redirect goal from Joel Eriksson Ek to Kirill Kaprizov. You get the goalie out of position. You have guys in front of the net that are ready to pounce. That's 3 goals right there. And that is 100% the difference in the outcome for this one.
Yeah, 100%. I tweeted it out, yesterday too during the game. That entire line was buzzing. Jordan Greenway, he showed more life than he has all season. It was good for him. Freddie Gaudreau was great too. He's been just playing phenomenal hockey for the Wild here. He's been key for the depth. And the shootout machine, and UC Saros, you mentioned it too. I mean, when he's on his game, he's one of the best. He's also one of the smallest he is the smallest goalie in the NHL too. So, I mean, if you can get some rebounds off him or, get him out of position, that's where he can let out, a few in a row, and then the wheels fall off for Nashville there. And I mean, that second goal that Kirill had was just absolutely phenomenal. Nobody's stopping that puck.
No.
Yeah. He had that look in his eye, like, we're not losing this game to Nashville. They were on a back end of a back-to-back. They had to travel. So this is one they needed to win. And you and I always joke, but this is another game where they played another team on the back end of a back-to-back. It's just, you can't make it up. It's an interesting schedule this season.
Well, and of all the teams that have been on the second night of a back-to-back against the Wild, Nashville was the one that showed it the most. Because how would you like to be UC Saros and your day starts with a breakaway and 2 shorthanded attempts right off?
Give me a break, yeah.
And it's even worse, the Nashville power play. I'm going to talk this to death just because it was so glaring to me being there. That first Nashville power play was infinitely worse than it looked on TV, because on that Greenway breakaway attempt, you had the entire Nashville power play unit swung around to one side, and so he gets the puck on a turnover. There's nobody within even closing distance of him. And thankfully for Nashville, Saros makes the save. But then on that same power play, you have Connor Dewar get loose, and he gets 2 shots on net. Like, that Nashville team was a disaster early in that game. And if not for UC Saros keeping a minute, that's 5-6-1 probably at the end.
Yeah, 100%. We see it a lot when on those back-to-backs. Teams just don't have any energy. Their legs are tired, and like you said, Saros he tried everything he tried, But the Wild, their pressure, and then you have a superstar like Kirill, and it's it's tough. Roman Yossi can only do so much.
No.
He can't. Thank God he can't play the entire 60 minutes because that guy is just a freak of nature. He's got a 9-game point streak. Going against the Wild. It's just, that's the one thing you can't let him overtake a game.
In the immortal words of Kevin Harlan, he is an assassin.
Yes.
And he was able to slip one right underneath. It kind of caught Gustafsson in the ribs and went off of his left arm into the net. So one that maybe you'd like your goalie to have that save, but at the end of the day, that's just a tricky angle shot. That Yossi was able to get in, and just a freak.
Yeah, you tip your cap.
Unbelievable talent. And speaking of unbelievable talent, the Wild had one for about 10 minutes on Friday night's game as Ryan O'Reilly was traded to the Minnesota Wild and then traded to the Toronto Maple Leafs. You have players being sent left and right. You've got money being exchanged. Just total chaos, dogs and cats living together. So we'll talk about the trade broker approach. And Michael Russo and Joe Smith have talked about this at length. Our first instance of the Wild being brokers at the trade deadline. And so we'll talk about that and what it could mean for the deadline approach going forward as we continue today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Our next partner has a product I use literally every day. I started taking AG1 because it helps you simplify your vitamin and supplement routine. All you have to do is take one delicious scoop of AG1 and you're absorbing 75 high-quality vitamins, minerals, whole food sourced superfoods, probiotics, and adaptogens to help you start your day right. Best of all, it's lifestyle friendly. So whether you eat keto, paleo, vegan, dairy-free, or gluten-free, AG1 is a small micro habit with big benefits. It's one thing you can do every single day to take great care of yourself. Right now, it's time to reclaim your health and arm your immune system with convenient daily nutrition. It's just one scoop in a cup of water every day. That's it. No need for a million different pills and supplements to look out for your health. To make it easy, Athletic Greens is going to give you a free 1-year supply of immune-supporting vitamin D and 5 free travel packs with your first purchase. All you have to do is visit athleticgreens.com/NHL Network. Again, that's athleticgreens.com/NHL Network to take ownership over your health and pick up the ultimate daily nutritional insurance. Continuing today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, thanks for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, go check out the Locked on NHL podcast as we get closer to the trade deadline. Who's buying, who's selling, who's brokering. All of that available at Locked on NHL, wherever you listen to your podcasts. Seth Topol and Alex Micheletti continuing today's episode. Ryan O'Reilly, Wild center for all of 10 minutes. It still counts. He still was a member of the Wild. And basically the trade boils down to this. One of the approaches possible for the Wild at the deadline was to help teams facilitate trades in exchange for assets, to broker deals for cap-strapped teams. And that is no different than what happened here. And Michael Russo knocked it out of the park with explaining and analyzing what all happened for this trade. Not only did it allow the Wild to gain a pick back in return, a 4th-round pick in 2025 for taking on minimal cap space. The bigger part to this, I think, is the fact that it kept Ryan O'Reilly out of the Western Conference by the Wild stepping in and sending him to Toronto because Colorado was interested. There were a couple of other Western Conference teams currently in the playoff picture that were sniffing at that possibility as well. And so not only did the Wild get an asset, they also sent him to a team that if they were to make the playoffs, they wouldn't have to face till the final. So there's something to be said about Bill Guerin just saying, we'll help you out, but we kind of want to see this thing steered in a particular direction.
Yeah, I mean, he's an amazing, centerman. He's a top line center on Toronto. He won't be, but he's the type of player that you win playoff games with, and that's why Kyle Dubas acquired him. Thank goodness he's out of the Western Conference. I mean, we saw when they won the Stanley Cup. I mean, he just dominated, and that's a heck of a pickup. You mentioned it too. There was other Western Conference teams that could have taken care of him, and so Bill Guerin, that's why he made the move. Who cares? I know people are very upset that they did this, but he did it. He just didn't do it. He didn't do it for nothing. They got an asset out of it, and the prospect that they gave to Toronto, Pilar, is not going to, he was not going to get a contract. He's going to re-enter the draft. So, it's minimal. You're only paying the rest of, or a small portion of, O'Reilly's contract for the rest of the season. And heck, he might re-sign with St. Louis. So, it's going to, be interesting to see what happens with that.
Yeah, if I recall the exact number, it's the Wild are paying 25% of the pro-rated cap hit for the rest of the season.
Right.
For a 4th round pick in 2025. And so it is the first move. The Wild have the opportunity to make plenty more because of how they have maneuvered the cap so far this season. They've got something like 11 or 12 million dollars in space to do more of this. And I will say, if the Wild go the broker route fully and don't necessarily add, but make lateral moves at the trade deadline to maybe jettison a couple of players to open up roster spots, if they go the full broker route, they are going to get much better assets back than a 4th round pick, because I'll just throw out a name that I hadn't really considered before we hit record. Let's say the New Jersey Devils are looking to get into the Timo Meier sweepstakes and aren't able to take on that entire salary. That would be an appealing one for the Wild to get involved on, because it just seems like a logical fit for those two teams. Now, you mentioned Meier is currently injured, which throws a little bit of a wrench into that. But those are the types of things where if you have guys on the last year of their deal, I know I had somebody on Twitter who said the Wild wouldn't be able to necessarily get involved in Erik Karlsson. True, because he's got more than just this year, and so that gets complicated. But Timo Meier would be a perfect example. He's in the final year of his deal, $6 million cap hit. You eat a portion of that for a team like the Devils, who really have a legit chance to go pretty far this year, you're going to get something nice in return for your efforts. And so buy, sell, broker is looking more and more like a very appealing option, because that cap space is gone at the end of the season. So if you have it, you might as well use it and get some good things in return.
Yeah, especially, I know the O'Reilly trade, it's not a draft pick for this year, but if they can get picks for this summer, it'd be huge, because this is one of the best drafts that's, that the NHL's going to have in quite a while. And so, like you said, they can get some future talent, that can help in the, a couple future years. But then when that talent is ready to go, on top of a team, that or a prospect pool that the Athletic is saying is the best in the NHL. Watch out. And like you said too, if they can get some current players off this team involved in those trades too, and open up spots for guys like Marco Rossi, Sammy Walker. The list goes on and on of some of those guys down there in in Iowa, and also we got Brock Faber going to sign here in a couple months, and so yeah, it's exciting time for the future of the Wild, and yeah, we'll see if they make the playoffs too. What happens with that?
I can pretty much guarantee you it's not even that hot of a take. It's like a room temperature water take. Is that will not be the only move that the Wild make between now and the trade deadline. There are going to be plenty of things that the Wild are in on. They may not pull the trigger on all of them, but they're not going to just sit on their hands. There will be moves made, and it's a situation I don't know that the Wild have really ever been in, but it's making the most of your situation. It's cap space that you're not going to have at the end of the season, so you might as well use it.
Right. Yeah, 100%. And like I said, the future is extremely bright, and fans can't panic if they sell some players too, because they have players in Iowa that can play in the NHL. They've proven it. At least Sammy Walker has, but Marco Rossi does have NHL experience under his belt, and so give them a chance too. And we Adam Beckman has come up, and they haven't lost with the 2 games that he's played in. So, and he's given some energy, and it's nice to have that youthful presence in the lineup too.
Sell high on Jordan Greenway. He looked pretty good.
Yes.
With Duhaime and Freddie Gaudreau. So, Billy, make that phone call. Get that done. Busy week for the Wild coming up, including a familiar face coming back to XL Energy Center on Tuesday, and a chance to see quite literally the worst team in the Eastern Conference, not once, but twice. We'll take a look at the week ahead as we finish today's episode of Locked on Wild after this. Today's sponsor of Locked on Wild is the official sportsbook partner of Locked On. That, of course, is FanDuel Sportsbook. And we have hit the midway point of the NBA season. And now is the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores to three-pointers drained. If you were betting on the Wild's game against the Predators, I hope you took the over because that was an easy cash, although it did get a little dicey at the end. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA and Locked On. Final segment of today's episode of Locked on Wild. Once again, thanks for making Locked on Wild your first listen each and every day. For your second listen, go ahead and take a listen to Locked on Kings as the Los Angeles Kings come into town on Tuesday. Kevin Fiala returns to the XL Energy Center with a Kings team coming in, playing some pretty good hockey, trying to keep their role going and keep their hold in those top 3 spots in the Pacific Division. So Locked on NHL, Locked on Kings, I should say, available wherever you listen to your podcasts. Seth Topol, Alex Micheletti finishing today's episode, and let's talk those Kings. They come in and have been playing some pretty good hockey at this point in the season. They score a ton of goals. They give up a ton of goals. And it's a team that is 7-2-1 in their last 10. Kevin Fiala having a great season. Good offense. Dice roll on the defense. The goaltending, though.
Yeah, I mean, Phoenix Copley, I mean, just a kind of like a little unsung hero. He's a journeyman that's kind of bounced around the minors in NHL, and they needed another goalie because Cal Peterson was struggling extremely, and so they call up Phoenix Copley, and he's been phenomenal and kind of pushed Jonathan Quick to the side there. Quick played the other night beating the Coyotes. He almost blew it, but they are a fun team to watch because Rob Blake has started to really rally some talent around the old guard, as he would say, the Kopitars, Drew Doughty, Jonathan Quick, and a guy that's having a phenomenal season is Adrian Kempe. He's just been on fire, and Anze Kopitar has just been, when you think of a future Hall of Famer, you think of that guy right there. He's done it all, won multiple cups. He plays the game the right way. He's a class act, fun to watch. And they're surprising teams. I think it's same thing with the Kraken. You think that these teams have been a pushover, but not this season. And so it's gonna be interesting to see how the crowd reacts with Fiala. It's not his fault. The Wild just couldn't pay him. And I'm sure if he had the choice, I'm sure he would have re-signed here if the money was capable. But he took the one of the teams that really wanted him, and they were able to afford him, and it's been a home run for him. So we wish him well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a Kings team that had one of the most just unbelievable social media owns of the season in the game against the Anaheim Ducks, in which John Gibson came out to center ice, was ready to fight his counterpart in that game, Mr. Copley, and the Ducks said something to the effect of, he doesn't want the smoke. And the Kings responded with, he has more wins by himself than your team does as a whole this season. And just, I was not ready for that. But good work by the Kings to really seize the moment there. And that's just the start of the week. But you look beyond that, and we've got a Blue Jacket sandwich. 2 games against the Blue Jackets with a Toronto Maple Leafs game sandwiched in between. And so you get an opportunity to see a team that just really has not been able to put anything together this year. They're the worst team in the Eastern Conference. And even with the struggles that this team has had, the Wild that is, in scoring, it's a goalie room that there really is no excuse to not put up a pretty decent amount of goals in the 2 games, because I was not prepared for the numbers when I looked at them, but they're not great. They're not great at all.
No. I mean, Merzlikins and Korpisalo, I mean, they've been, in the NHL for quite a bit, and they have been solid goaltenders in the past. I know they've been dealing with a lot of injuries, but it's horrendous. And those are 2 games, like we talked about on the Western side of the teams that are in the Bedard mix. Columbus is squarely on the Eastern side in the Bedard mix. And like we always talk about, you can't give a team hope, and let them get an early goal, because they do, even though they're struggling so much, they do have some talent offensively in Johnny Gaudreau and Patrick Laine and Boone Jenner. So those are guys that you have to still watch out for, because I don't think individually they're tanking, but maybe management, not the players themselves, but yeah, it's one of those, again, weird scheduling quirks where you play them really close, with another game in between, which is, I don't get that.
There are a few of those coming up. You've got the back-to-back against Calgary, which
Yeah,
is
that's gonna be intense.
it's a back-to-back over the course of a full week.
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I don't get it, but
No.
it does feel like, and we've saved this for the teams it applies to, but it feels like a couple of you really should definitely probably win those two games against the Columbus Blue Jackets, because you've got the Toronto Maple Leafs on the road as well, and Toronto just got Ryan O'Reilly. He's playing second line center, which means that it's a deep lineup, and we saw what happened the last time these two teams squared off. That was at the X, a 4-3 loss for the Wild, but Toronto, just a team that just peppers you with offense, and it's not going to be a game that the Wild can try to keep up with. It'll be another classic example of having to try to slow the tempo down and wear Toronto down so that they have to adjust their style, as opposed to the Wild having to try to get into a track meet.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, Austin Matthews, William Nylander, Mitch Marner, John Tavares, Morgan Riley on the back end. I mean, and then you add O'Reilly to the mix. Yeah, it's just, Michael Bunting. You do the names go on and on. It's gonna have to be one of those old school Jock Lemaire type games. The first two, try your best. I mean, Chicago, beat them last night somehow with a rookie goaltender. And a rookie getting the game winner, and Cole Gutman. With the Blackhawks, and Patrick Kane getting a hat trick. That you take care of business starting Tuesday. Starting tomorrow. Because that creates all the good momentum for the entire week. If you can get that first game of the week going, and keep the win streak going here, and all the teams now, they won't say it publicly, but they're scoreboard watching. They're checking the NHL.com app and Twitter and all their social medias, and they're hearing the pressure too. And this is it's a dog world too. No one's gonna feel sorry for injuries or back-to-backs or travel. This is the time of the year where playoffs are on the line, and so it's gonna be intense. These games this past week, it just, when they go to overtime, you feel it. Even if you're not there at the games, you feel it from watching on TV too, how intense it is. Some of the saves Gustafsson made in overtime, and the shootout where games could have gone either way. It was just intense. Yeah. So it was a fun week of Wild hockey. It's going to be another fun week here coming up too.
Yeah, and even with the fact that the Nashville game didn't go to overtime,
Right.
I was clenched after the Predators tied it up at 3. I was like, oh boy,
You
here we
can't
go
give Nashville a point. Yeah,
No.
and then
And
Ryan Hartman's chest saves the day.
yeah, thankfully the hockey gods said, "Don't worry, we just wanted to give you an opportunity to get super loud at the arena." And I said, "Okay, fair. We'll take that, and thank you for giving us the 2 points and giving Nashville 0." So, all in all, an exciting game. Fun to be there in person. We'll be doing more of that as the season unfolds, as we continue to bring you as much Wild coverage as we possibly can. That will do it for today's episode. So now that your first listen is done, make sure you check out Locked On NHL. We're getting close to the trade deadline. Who's buying, who's selling, who is brokering. You can find all that out at Locked On NHL, which is available on all of your favorite podcast platforms, just like Locked On Wild. So follow us on YouTube, subscribe wherever you listen, follow us on social media. You'll find all sorts of content at all of those different places all throughout the week, plus pre and post game, as we keep you up to date on all things Minnesota Wilds. We have new episodes every Monday through Friday as part of the Locked On Sports Podcast Network.